Great. Hi, everyone. So I'll try and keep this short because you're probably wanting to get out. So I'm Simon Daisley from Christchurch City Libraries. I work with the digital content team. My role is Community Stories Liaison. This isn't my usual role. This is related to some other stuff that I do. But can anyone guess where that is? Tibet, yep. So Yambulakang, which is one of the oldest buildings in Tibet. So like everyone else, my journey here was not straightforward. I grew up in lots of places in New Zealand, mainly Hutt Valley and Wellington. That's where I spent my formative years. When I was growing up, I was always interested in history, to the point where I sort of annoyed one teacher where I corrected her knowledge of Salah ad-Din's soldiers' bathing habits at age 8. But I really enjoyed a show called Epitaph, which had Paul Gettins on it, and he went around exploring old headstones and researching the stories behind people who were buried and the mysteries, quite often quite gruesome, and going through the old archives. And I thought that'd be a great job to have. I wish I could have a job like that. But then growing up in New Zealand at that time, people always said, no, historian, archaeologist, you're never going to get a job, do something useful. So I sort of failed high school, dropped out, just sort of drifted around, worked in a supermarket, told I was going nowhere. And then decided, finally, I'm going to go to university. So went to university and initially went to do German history, but I ended up being drawn towards religious studies and history to do with India, Tibet, Islam. So as you can see here, behind me is photos of different statues of Mad Durga, who's a Hindu goddess. So I'll come to that in a moment, why that's relevant to this talk. So after doing I did a history undergrad at UC and started doing my masters. Then I realised the first earthquake happened, and I was a bit worried about job opportunities in Christchurch. So I went to Vic and did museum and heritage studies there, postgraduate diploma in 2011. Finished up there. And at the end of the course, we had to have our CVs analysed by people in the people analysed by people in the sector. And there was one person from one organisation, I won't name it, but we had to list all the papers we studied. So naturally, I had papers to do with India, Islam, Hindu goddesses, and she blatantly said in front of everyone, "I'm looking at your CV, and if I was you, I wouldn't mention anything to do with this Indian stuff, into Hindu goddesses." I just sat there, took it quietly, just didn't say anything. I wanted to. Went home to my family, and my grandmother, who grew up at the time when she had to hide being Indian, she said to me, this is why you don't tell anyone you're Indian, because you're never going to get a job, jewels are just going to close on you, because she was from that generation when it happened. And I said, no, it's different now, Nanny, it's different. So I was really hurt by that, but I carried on. So I put myself out there when I was doing internships. I did Ministry of Culture and Heritage, doing the South Africa de Boer War. And so if you go to the New Zealand History website, all that content was stuff that I did research there for. My first job was contracting for New Zealand Defence Force, and that was going through hundreds of photographs of soldiers' graffiti from the Second World War. Really rough stuff that they wrote. These were on the firing ranges at Trentham. So if you're delicate, you might see some stuff you're not like, but it's available online there on New Zealand, on the Upper Hutt Library website. Then just put myself out there contracting. This was just one thing I did for Historic Places Trust, Heritage New Zealand now. Quite a nice old settlement with a marae, having to stay there when I was a teenager, so I quite liked it. I just cold called iPens, which was, I think it's got a different name now, but it was the Institute of Engineering. They did a lot of heritage work, and so, they had reports to write on old bridges, so I took up that job, and it's actually really interesting. Old bridges in New Zealand are interesting, even though my background was completely different, I found it interesting. Then I got another job for about 3-4 months working for Wellington City Council on the Earthquake Heritage Register buildings. That was really great, learned a lot about history of Wellington. But by that stage, I was really over Wellington. I'd grown up there as a teenager. Earthquakes had done, obviously cemented my ties to Canterbury, so I really wanted to come home. So came back to Christchurch in 2013, just devastated city. You couldn't even get into here. There's nothing here. Everyone I knew from university just fled overseas to glamorous careers in Germany, Australia, London. I thought, no, I want to stay. I want to stay here and sort of see the rebuild of this city, because if everyone leaves, then there's nothing left for the future generations. And so I again started cold calling people. Catherine hired me briefly for doing heritage reports. So thank you, Catherine. And then I cold called Christchurch City Council, and they hired me to do their Banks Peninsula heritage reviews. So reviewing a lot of heritage buildings in Banks Peninsula. That was great, getting to drive out to Akaroa, O'Kane's Bay, everywhere. Learned a lot about that. Same time, the words that this person had said at my CV review had really stayed with me, and I really wanted to prove that person wrong. So I started to, when I was doing my work in Akaroa, I came across early Indian Muslims who were living out there in the early start of the 20th century. And I really wanted to prove that Indians have been here since, the first Indians have been here since 1850, first Muslims were living here in 1850. So I wanted to really show that Indian history has just a strong tie to Christchurch than a lot of people think. So I spent a lot of time researching early Indian Muslims who were living here, working on the peninsula. I shelved that project after March 15th, just obviously for obvious reasons. I then went into council, briefly working in just civic, and then I ended up in the libraries and with a digital content team. At the same time, Turanga was being built. We launched the Discovery Wall, which was an interactive touchscreen, so I was part of the team dealing with that, with the historic images. So Stephen's MZMS doing a lot of digitisation for us, which we're really grateful for. And then we launched Canterbury Stories, which is the digital heritage repository, which has got over now 68,000 items in there. After COVID, my colleague Sarah Tester started a project called the Community Stories Liaison, and we shared the role. She couldn't be here, unfortunately, because she's ill. My job now is to work with different communities who have never been represented traditionally in our heritage collection and working with their history. So a lot of having to go out, introduce myself to people. A lot of these communities come from all different groups. Another community that's been here since the 1850s again, the Jewish community, so working with the synagogue. And then lots of other different communities. You'd be amazed how many different groups are here. So that's my job. I go out and work there and help preserve their history. And I always say to them, they often think that photographs of today are not relevant, and I say no. I say in 100 years' time, your great-grandchild is going to want to know what life in Christchurch was like when great-grandmother arrived from Afghanistan. So it's about showing that what's happening now is just as going to be relevant in the future when I'm long gone. These are some of the groups that I work with. These are some of the photos of my collection. So Hazara, Iranian, Sinhala, Sri Lankan Buddhists. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Bangla, the synagogue, and Tibetan Buddhists. And on that note, here is these two photos I chose to sort of conclude the journey I was on. These are two photos from two different groups that I work with. One is the Bengali group, the other is Bangla dance group. There's a photo from our collection of Mad Durga, the Hindu goddess, who's defeating the buffalo demon, Mahashwara. And then next to us is a photo of another group with a statue of Saraswati, who's a Hindu goddess of learning. So that journey of being told, don't mention this Hindu goddess stuff, has now come to this. I do it for a job and I get paid for it. So another thing I'll note is living in Christchurch, New Zealand, you think, there's not many opportunities. That doesn't mean you can do stuff in your own spare time. One of my passion projects I've been doing since 2012 was cataloguing the history of Buddhist monasteries in Russia. That might seem an oxymoron, but the Kalmyk people who live near Ukraine are Mongolian people who migrated to Russia, and they lived under the Tsars, built many beautiful Buddhist monasteries. Under the socialists, after 1918, they were just all destroyed, massive cultural genocide, their culture was wiped out. It was restored in the 1990s under a Kalmyk Lama. So what I did was I started to rebuild their monasteries using digital technology, and I'll briefly show you a website I've been working on. So this is a website I launched called the Hurul project. Hurul means Buddhist monastery in Kalmykian. So again, all their monasteries are destroyed, but I had no digital technology, but just taught myself how to do it. And just built these digital models which you can explore. Also, digital mapping. So I mapped out where the monasteries used to be, working with a lot of old Kalmyks. So again, just sort of preserving their culture for the next generation. It's something very special to me. That's another story, my connection there. But really grateful to see the recognition it gets from a lot of Kalmyks, because a lot of Kalmyks settled in America, so they're very grateful for this as well. So it just shows that, yeah, again, just because you work, just people won't think, Christchurch is small and you can't get a name made on the international stage, but if you've got a passion and something you're really passionate about, you can follow through with it and get your name known overseas. So my advice for the future young generation is, yeah, if you've got a passion, something that you're really passionate about, don't let anyone put you off it. You're going to come across a lot of bullies, a lot of people who are just going to hate on you. Just keep going. There's going to be a lot of doors that are closed. Keep knocking, and the main theme that comes out of this is just keep writing emails, cold calling people. That's how I got some work. And you'll eventually annoy people enough to the point where they're like, let's just hire them because they're not going to go away. So yeah, and just network. It's really important. And yeah, just love what you do. And I'm really grateful to do what I do.